Here's a question that would have been easy to answer 70 years ago and is almost impossible to answer today. What is a communist? In 1955, everyone knew. A communist believed the state should own the factories, abolish private property, plan the whole economy from the top, and let a single party run everything. A capitalist believed the opposite: private property, free markets, prices set by supply and demand, the government mostly out of the way. Two clean boxes. You could sort almost any country into one or the other in about 5 seconds. Now try it today. The largest country on earth, still ruled by a communist party, has stock exchanges, a booming private sector, and more billionaires than any nation except the United States. Its next-door neighbor, also run by a communist party, is one of the favorite places on the planet for foreign factories looking to escape higher costs somewhere else. So, are they communist? Are they capitalist? The honest answer is that the words stopped working. And once you see why they stopped working, you realize the fight everyone thinks they're having, left against right, socialism against the free market, isn't the real fight at all. Let's start with the language, because that's where the trail begins. A word earns its keep by drawing a line. This is inside. That is outside. In 1955, communist and capitalist drew sharp lines. The Berlin Wall was a line you could touch. But watch what happened to the vocabulary over the next few decades. To describe what China actually became, people had to invent new terms: state capitalism, market socialism. The Chinese government coined its own phrase, socialism with Chinese characteristics. Vietnam went with socialist-oriented market economy. Economists reached for mixed economy, authoritarian capitalism, the developmental state. Here's the tell. When you need 5 brand new phrases to describe something, it's because the original word already failed. Nobody invents socialism with Chinese characteristics if plain socialism still fits. The new vocabulary is scar tissue, growing over a broken idea. And here's the part most people miss. The words leaked in both directions. Capitalist is supposed to be the clean opposite, but today it covers Sweden, with its enormous welfare state, and Singapore, where the government is one of the biggest players in the whole economy, and the United States, with its central bank quietly steering the system and its trillion-dollar bailouts. In just the last couple of years, even the United States has been reaching for tariffs, for bringing factories back home, for government direction of strategic industries. Critics have started describing American policy with words normally reserved for the other side, calling it statist, even mercantilist. One commentator only half-joked that the president was a socialist in sheep's clothing. When the flagship capitalist country gets called socialist, and the flagship communist country runs stock exchanges, the two words aren't sorting anything anymore. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein had a name for this. He said some words don't have a single shared essence. They work by family resemblance. Everything we call a game doesn't share one defining feature. The examples just overlap here and there, like relatives who all have a bit of the family nose. Capitalism and communism have quietly become family resemblance words. There's no crisp definition left underneath them. The map stopped matching the territory. So if the map is broken, we have to look at the territory directly. Let's look at the two countries that broke it. China first. Under Mao Zedong, China ran the textbook version of communism. Collective farms, state factories, central plans. No private property worth the name. The result was mass poverty. On the eve of reform, by the World Bank's measure, roughly 88% of Chinese people lived in extreme poverty. Then, in 1978, Deng Xiaoping did something a communist leader was not supposed to do. He let the markets back in. Family farms, private businesses, special zones where foreign money could come in and build factories. His slogan wasn't ideological. It was almost aggressively practical. It doesn't matter, he said, whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice. The mice got caught. Today, China's private sector is so central, that it's often summed up in a single run of numbers. Private firms produce around 60% of the country's total output. They drive about 70% of its innovation. They provide roughly 80% of urban jobs, and they create around 90% of the new ones. Extreme poverty, once nearly universal, fell below 1%. But here is the crucial catch. The Communist Party never let go of the wheel. It still owns the land. It still controls the banks. State-owned giants still hold the commanding heights. Energy, telecoms, finance. Something like a quarter of the entire economy. So what you have is a capitalist engine under a communist steering wheel. Private hustle for growth, state control for direction, and for survival.
Now Vietnam. And the story rhymes. By 1986, Vietnam was on the edge of collapse. Inflation was running at around 700%. Farmers were going hungry. The economy was being kept alive by roughly $4 million a day in aid from a Soviet Union that was itself falling apart. Orthodox communism had brought the country to the brink. So the Communist Party launched a program called Doi Moi. It means renovation. And it was the same move Deng had made. Break up the collective farms, free the prices, let private business exist, open the doors to foreign investment. The results are almost hard to believe. Income per person went from a little over $400 a year to several thousand. The poverty rate fell from around 60% to 14%, lifting roughly 40 million people out of poverty. Vietnam joined the World Trade Organization, wired itself into global supply chains, and became, arguably, the single biggest winner as companies started moving their factories out of China. And through all of it, Vietnam stayed a one-party communist state, with Ho Chi Minh still on the wall. Now step back and ask the obvious question. Why did two communist parties voluntarily build capitalist economies? Not because they read Adam Smith and had a change of heart. They did it because central planning was starving their people, and market reforms made their countries strong. Deng's line about the cat was never a defense of capitalism. It was a declaration that ideology is a tool. You use whichever one catches mice. Which means the label on the box was never the real content. And that opens the door to the actual argument. If communist and capitalist no longer sort these countries, then what does? One word: the nation. China does what is good for China. Vietnam does what is good for Vietnam. They will wear a communist costume or a capitalist costume, whichever one makes the nation richer, stronger, and more secure. The ideology is just a tool. The nation is the point. And here's what makes this lens so powerful. It suddenly makes the whole confusing world readable again. You stop asking, is this country socialist or capitalist? A question with no clean answer. And you start asking, is this country acting for itself or for something above itself? That question you can actually answer. Because this isn't only an Asian story. Look at what's happening in the West right now. The America First agenda is the Western echo of the exact same instinct. On the first day of his second term, the President of the United States issued a memorandum that reoriented trade policy around a single principle. American trade should benefit Americans. Full stop. It came with sweeping tariffs, a drive to bring factories back home, and a stated goal that the country should produce more of what it consumes. The old free trade orthodoxy, the idea that open markets are simply natural and good, was treated not as sacred, but as something to be renegotiated for national advantage. One honest note, for accuracy, it has been a messy, improvised, and legally contested agenda. In early 2026, the United States Supreme Court actually struck down the broadest of those tariffs. But the underlying instinct is unmistakable. And notice what just happened. The most capitalist country on earth is now doing state-directed industrial policy. And, just like Deng, It's reaching for whatever tool serves the nation. Different costume, same logic. So the real divide of our era is not left against right. It's this. On one side, nationalism. The belief that the nation is the highest unit that matters, and that policy should serve it. On the other side, globalism, or internationalism. The belief that the nation is too small for the problems that really count, and that we need shared rules and shared institutions above the nation. That is the fight. So let's do the honest thing and argue both sides as strongly as we can. Because both are stronger than their opponents like to admit. Start with the strongest point the nationalist has. And it's a good one. Accountability. Your national government, whatever its flaws, has to face you. There's an election, a ballot, a way to throw the bums out. Now, name the last time you voted for an official at the World Trade Organization, or the International Monetary Fund, or the United Nations. You didn't. You can't. These bodies make decisions that reshape entire economies, and they never once appear on your ballot. So the nationalist asks a fair question. Why should power flow to people I can never remove? Second point, subsidiarity. It's the principle that decisions should be made as close as possible to the people who have to live with them. A rule written in a distant capital for 200 countries at once cannot possibly know the texture of your town, your industry, your coastline. The people who feel the consequences should have the loudest voice. Third, and this is the sharpest blade, perverse incentives. International organizations are not neutral referees floating serenely above humanity. They are bureaucracies. They develop their own interests. They get captured by their most powerful members. And they can end up sacrificing the concrete wishes of a real local community to some abstract global goal that looks noble on paper and lands badly on the ground. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's basic organizational reality. An institution with no voters answers to no one except itself. Fourth, the historical record, which is genuinely awkward for the globalists. The countries that pursued naked national self-interest, China, Vietnam, and before them the Asian tiger economies, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, often outperformed the ones that swallowed globalist economic orthodoxy whole. And there's a pointed argument associated with the economist Ha-Joon Chang that today's rich countries themselves grew wealthy behind high tariffs and heavy state intervention. And then, once they were on top, they turned around and preached free trade to everyone else, kicking away the ladder they had just climbed. And underneath all of it, the deepest point of all, self-determination. A people has the right to decide its own way of life, its own trade-offs, its own culture, its own future, without being overruled by outsiders who don't share its fate. That is a serious case. It is not xenophobia, and it is not nostalgia. Held at its best, it's a simple demand. Government that answers to the governed. But it has a hole in it, and the hole is the size of the modern world.
Here's the problem with the pure nationalist picture. It quietly assumes the nation can actually contain the things that matter. And that assumption died a long time ago. Think about the moment it died. Once it became possible for an ordinary person to board a plane and be on another continent by dinner. Once two people on opposite sides of the earth could talk to each other in real time for free. A purely national picture of the world was already obsolete, because the things that shape a nation's fate had stopped respecting its borders. Money moves at the speed of a keystroke. A virus moves at the speed of a flight. Carbon does not check passports, and neither does a financial panic, or a piece of information, or a person fleeing a war. Which brings us to the globalists' knockout argument: collective action problems. There is a whole class of problems that no nation, no matter how sovereign, no matter how strong, can solve on its own. Climate change, pandemics, nuclear weapons spreading, financial contagion, tax havens. For every one of these,
If each country acts purely for itself, everyone loses. It's the classic trap, where choices that make perfect sense for each player add up to disaster for all of them. Sovereignty over a problem you cannot physically contain is not power. It is just the freedom to lose alone. Then there's the argument written in blood: peace. The system of rules and institutions built after 1945, the United Nations, the post-war trade order, the whole architecture the nationalists now want to shrink, lined up with the longest stretch without a war between great powers in modern history. And this isn't a new idea. Back in 1938, a group of free market thinkers meeting in Paris warned that without shared, enforceable rules, nothing stops nations from sliding into destructive protectionism and eventually into war. They had just watched it happen. Rules, in this view, are not a cage. They are a guardrail on a cliff that everyone has fallen off before. And here's the irony that should stop every nationalist cold. The biggest winners of the globalist order were the nationalists. China and Vietnam did not lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty by walling themselves off. They did it by plugging in, by joining the World Trade Organization, by courting foreign investment, by selling into the open world markets that the globalist system created and protected. They did not reject globalization. They feasted on it, for national ends. The great nationalist success stories are, underneath, globalization's success stories. You cannot cleanly pull the two apart. And one last point, especially if you're a small country: rules protect the weak. In a world with no international order, might simply makes right. The big nations do what they want, and the small ones suffer what they must. A rules-based system is, at least in principle, the shield of the country that isn't strong enough to win a fistfight. Tear it down, and you don't free the small nation, you expose it. So the globalist is not a naive dreamer. At their best, they are the realist in the room, saying, the problem's already crossed the border. Our politics has to cross it too.
So, who's right? Here's the uncomfortable answer. Each side is strongest exactly where the other one is weakest. Globalism has a real disease, and the nationalists are not imagining it. Call it the democratic deficit. Power drifts upward to bodies that no voter ever chose. Standards can get dragged into a race to the bottom. Remote elites can and do override communities that have no way to fight back. Every time a globalist waves this away as paranoia, they prove the nationalists' point. But nationalism has a real disease too, and the globalists are not imagining that one either. Left pure, it cannot handle a single problem that crosses a border, and it curdles easily. From us first, into us alone, and from us alone into them, as the enemy. The 20th century is a long, bloody catalog of exactly where unchecked national pride can lead. So we are left with a tension that may simply be permanent. The particular against the universal. Rootedness against openness. The community you can see against the problems you can't. Every serious political thinker eventually runs into this wall, and nobody has knocked it down. But our two case studies do point at something. Not a solution, a template. China and Vietnam never chose either of the pure options. They did not seal themselves off, and they did not simply surrender to somebody else's rulebook. They did something harder and smarter. They engaged the world on their own terms, for their own benefit. They used the global system without ever worshiping it. That is not pure nationalism, and it is not pure globalism. Thinkers have started giving this middle ground names. Responsible nationalism, if you come at it from the national side. Rooted cosmopolitanism, if you come at it from the global one. Both are pointing at the same target. Nations, pursuing their own enlightened self-interest, inside rules that they had a hand in writing. Which brings us all the way back to where we started. The fight was never really communism against capitalism. Those were always just tools. Costumes,
that a country puts on and takes off, depending on what makes it strong. The broken words were hiding an older and much deeper question. And it's the question we are actually arguing about every time we think we're arguing about economics. Who do we owe things to? Our nation or the world? Deng didn't answer it. America First hasn't answered it. 2,000 years of philosophy haven't answered it. But at least now, we can see it clearly. And that is more than the old words ever let us do.